Hey, so for this video, we're going to do a quick, air quotes, installation of the Express edition of Oracle 11g's database. Now, if you go to the Oracle web page and you look for free downloads, you'll see the Express edition, but the 11g is old and no longer supported by Oracle, but it works seamlessly, flawlessly with all the examples in your two textbooks, which is why we're going to standardize on this version. Future iterations of this class, if the textbooks get updated, we'll update the version accordingly. But long story short, there are some security and other performance enhancements in the newer version of Express Edition than in this edition, but for our purposes, it is 100% going to be the same. Right, we're going to install the database server, we're going to connect to it via the GUI and through the CLI, we're going to look at its services, we'll create databases and tables, we'll run queries using an external program called SQL Developer, but that's a separate video. So in your nested VM, so if you're in either of my CIS255 classes, you want to boot up the Windows 10 VM inside Hyper-V. You are not going to install Oracle on the guest VM, the one with this purple colored background. Right, so you're going to start your VM, you're going to connect to it, and in the downloads folder, you should see a couple of things. Oracle 11g XE has already been downloaded for you. If you were curious, I got it from this website. This is just a Google Drive. The author here makes the zip file available. It's free, right? You don't even have to sign in. You just click disk 1 and it'll download as a zip file. You'll unzip the file into this folder, and here's the stuff you need. Okay, so we'll double click setup. It should, depending on your UAC or user account control policies, should ask you, yes, I want to. You need administrator level permissions on the local PC. In this case, this is a Windows 10 box. Now, obviously, in a production environment, you are installing any instance of a database server on a server class OS. So your higher end Linux distros, your Windows Server 16, 2019, or 2022. But again, for our purposes, Windows 10 is just fine. Okay, so we'll hit next here. You're going to have to accept the terms of the agreement. Your choice to read it or not. You have to have gone to Harvard Law School, excuse me, to make heads or tails of this. Yes, that's the only choice. Next. Okay, now, I see this message because I have installed and uninstalled this repeatedly. So the default directory already exists for me. You, if this is the first time you're installing it, you will not see this message, right? It's simply telling me that I have a directory that already exists and it's not empty, and the potential for this installation to overwrite files I may have customized or modified does exist. Please pay attention to this message if you see it. Okay, now, system, all lowercase, SYSTEM. Okay, that's the password I'm going to associate. This password will be very important later. Some default databases get installed. Okay, one called SYS, S-Y-S, all caps. The other called System, S-Y-S-T-E-M, all caps. We want the password in this test environment to be System because in the Muroc textbook, there are sample databases that we'll install later, and the administrative permissions given to the SYS and System users with this password allow the installation of those test databases without having to muck about with permissions. Okay, so use System, all one word, all lowercase, please. Okay, if you happen to have caps lock turned on here, if you happen to fat finger this password twice, I cannot help you resolve this. Right? To the best of my knowledge, there's no way to, well, there are ways, but let's talk about those later. I'm going to want you to get a screenshot of these settings. Now, generally how I get screenshots is I'll hold down the Windows key, hold down the Shift key, tap and release the S as in Sierra key. And that will bring up the Windows snipping tool. You can see my background kind of turns gray. My cursor changes into the crosshairs here. And I'm just going to highlight just the stuff I want. This will automatically make a copy of the graphic here, in which case I can then paste into a Word document. You are going to want these settings. Okay? You're going to be tested on them. So it's easier for you to record the stuff now as you go than it is to try to look it up while you're facing the pressure of a timed exam. You have been warned. Okay, so we'll hit install here and I'll hit pause. This will take about 2 minutes. Okay, so it took only about a minute this time, but I wanted to unpause the video so you could see that there are services that are being created and installing. You can also see I moved the File Explorer window out of the way. A new desktop shortcut comes up. We'll take a look at that here in a second. Let's repause the video because this will take a legit 2 minutes. And here we are. Once the database is installed, the database server rather is installed, we'll finish to much fanfare and applause. Okay, now let's go to the services applet, which I conveniently have open. And I'm going to go back to the top of the services. Now again, this is a tip I hope that you know. If you don't already know it, it's okay. On a timed test, this is going to save you a couple seconds. If I ask you to list the Oracle services that get installed after the database server is run, once you open the services applet, just type the letter O, and it's going to take you to the first service that happens to start with the letter you typed. And you can see that there are 5 different services. 2 of them are set to running and set to start automatically. The others are set to either manual or disabled. Okay, now we'll touch on these services as we go. But here and now, the database server service and the listener service, that's the one that allows users to connect to the databases and do DBA stuff. They're the only 2 things running. Okay, so let's take a look at, I'm going to go to the address 127.0.0.1. Now again, in a production environment, you're going to want to go to the DNS name or the actual IP address of your database server if you want to connect. Because this Windows 10 box is acting as my database server, I could, if I wanted to, I just come in here and type IP config. I could type this IP address in here. But those of you who have taken some intro networking classes, you know that 127.0.0.1 is the loopback or home address of the local machine. Now, this is a HTTP port. Obviously not secure. Obviously not the way you're going to set up the database server in a production environment. Okay? There's a set of instructions for changing the HTTP listener over to HTTPS. That will be a separate discussion though. And it logs me into the database server. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time going over this, but I'll show you kind of what it looks like. Okay, the home page, online help. You have questions about some detailed commands. Right? Our class is meant to be an introduction to databases, so we're going to talk about some introductory and potentially some intermediate level queries and joins and things like that. You have more in-depth questions, online help is your friend. Okay? There's a whole slew of links here to assist you if database engineering, data analysts, database administrator is your career service of choice. So if we come in here to storage, okay, I have to log in as a DB database administrator user. So let's log in as the sys user. Let's see if username is case sensitive. Should be all caps. Okay. Saved automatically. That's fine. Way to go, Microsoft Edge. Now listen, I don't have a lot of Linux experience, but to the best of my knowledge, Linux being much more case sensitive than Windows, CIS, generally speaking, will be typed in all uppercase. There's another database in here called system. Notice how it's written. Okay, these are the table spaces. We'll talk more about them in detail as we go, along with the amount of disk space used and the amount of free space left in each table. Again, we'll touch on that. We'll talk about some performance tuning things. We'll talk about the maximum sizes versus the current sizes, how to expand this, okay, those kinds of things. Now, generally speaking, though, we're not going to do much work from here. If you are a DBA and you're trying to do some updates that require the database server to be shut down, you're going to want to make sure that there are no sessions connected. Right now you can see, right, I'm logged in as anonymous with all these security identifiers, all these serial port connections. And again, we'll touch more on this stuff as we go. Okay. So here I can disconnect users in order to bring down the database server without causing some kind of crash. Okay, so that is pretty much the end of this video. The installation of the Oracle Express Edition version 11G. In the next video, we're going to talk about installing SQL Developer and getting that connected to the database server you just generated. Okay, so please let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.